Hey everyone, what's up? How are ya? Hope you're fine. My name is Anya. It's time for some creepy videos again, and well, I hope this video is as creepy as the thumbnail is, because that makes me feel kind of sick. So, let's go and see, and we'll find out.
The paranormal has always fascinated me. The
Um,
existence of spirits and phenomena that we cannot explain. The unknown has always been interesting. But this type of thing is not always what makes me lose sleep. It is the terrifying phenomena of everyday life that have brought out the most fears within me. In this somewhat different video, I plan to tell you stories that are not necessarily about ghosts, but that is still frightening. Nowadays, everyone assures that traveling by plane is the safest and most reliable way to go somewhere, even safer than traveling by boat or in your own vehicle. However, I don't know anyone who doesn't feel a little scared when taking off. It is natural for you to feel fear when you are practically flying in a shell no wider than 50 centimeters and thousands of feet high in the sky. The good news is that almost nothing can happen in the air. If an engine fails, the plane can land normally, and there can be strong turbulence, but no plane has ever fallen due to this. In short, almost nothing can happen to you. However, the history of aviation has been colored by traffic events, and some of them are so strange and disturbing that they border on the impossible. Here, we will not talk about the case of Malaysian Airlines or planes that need to make emergency landings. The things you are about to see here are not even imaginable in science fiction. Incredible events that border on mystery and the paranormal. Things that will surely surprise you. My name is Leonore Clay, and this is The Darkest Secret. Today we present real unnerving events that occurred in mid-flight. Number 5. June 10th, 1990 was just another day for the controllers at the Birmingham airport in the UK. As usual, they were giving instructions to the different planes that were landing and taking off. However, that day would go down in aviation history when they received a call from British Airways Flight 5390, a plane that had recently taken off from the airport bound for Spain. What they heard on the other end of the line left them completely petrified. Everyone looked at each other and proceeded with the emergency protocols while trying to clarify what had happened. The control tower asked the co-pilot to explain the situation while they were flying back. The plane was carrying 81 passengers and was at an altitude of more than 16,000 feet. It had only been 15 minutes after taking off when the left windshield of the cabin, this is right in front of the captain, unexpectedly detached from the fuselage, causing a decompression so intense it literally sucked the captain, Tim Lancaster, out of the aircraft.
Oh, Jesus.
Within fractions of a second, half of the man's body was outside of the plane, getting stuck in the aircraft's controls, which saved him from obvious death.
Jeez, that
The
is scary.
co-pilot put everything in automatic mode and proceeded to grab the captain by the legs. He yelled for help to the crew so he could turn and land the plane. After the astonishment of such a daunting scene, one of the crew members entered and took the place of the co-pilot, holding on to the captain with all of his strength. The images you now see on the screen is a recreation of the event exactly as the crew remembered it. The co-pilot returned to his seat and decided to make an emergency descent as quickly as possible to reach an altitude that would offer enough oxygen not only to the pilot, but also to all the passengers who, terrified, already thought of the worst scenario. It took 15 more minutes for the plane to land. During all that time, the captain was hanging out of the window, being hit by the strong winds which caused his legs to be hurt by the fuselage due to the pressure. Both the
Jeez.
co-captain and the crew assumed that the captain had already died, since the body was whipping against the plane at all times. The speed prevented oxygen. The plane was traveling so fast that the strong winds even ripped the skin of the person who held the captain's legs.
Ew.
Finally, 35 minutes after taking off, the plane managed to land. Everyone mourned the probable death of the captain until the paramedics arrived and informed everyone that miraculously, Lancaster had survived.
Wow.
Subsequent
Jesus.
investigations discovered that what caused the windshield to detach were a few screws that did not correspond to that model of the plane, and that were placed only 27 hours before takeoff. Without a doubt, an episode that marked all those who boarded that flight, and that surely they will never forget.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. Jesus.
Number 4.
I don't know what to say, but wow, everyone was really lucky here. Jeez. That could have ended quite differently. Oh, Gremlins.
If I mention the word gremlin, the first thing that would come to mind are the popular little creatures that were in American movies
I had a
that were a hit in the...
Sorry, I had a stuffed animal, stuffed gizmo back in the days. I'm pretty sure I still have it somewhere, but I don't know where. Oh, that was one of the first horror movies I saw as a kid. And while I really loved Gizmo, those thingies that they turn into, they scared the shit out of me, and I couldn't sleep alone for about 2 weeks or so. Yeah, I think I was 9 maybe. That was way but too young. But what would I know, you know? I didn't know I'd be scared, but well, never mind.
The 80s. But for the Anglo-Saxon world, these mischievous beings are part of their mythology. Beings that for the British Royal Air Force, they are much more than a simple myth. You see, something very strange started happening during the First World War. It was repeated a couple of times that British pilots of the Royal Air Force saw small creatures in the cockpits or on the wings of their planes. Some describe these beings as benevolent and even helpful, offering guidance to help pilots avoid crashes. At that time, the legends of the Gremlins were popular, so these people immediately thought that it was about these creatures. Some had wholesome and useful encounters, while others had destructive and dangerous encounters, drinking fuel, biting through wires, and making holes on the wings of the plane. One of the most popular stories is of a pilot who miraculously survived after landing his aircraft. He assured that his accident was due to small creatures causing damage to the fuselage of the plane, to the point of causing it to fail, mainly due to altering the engines and flight controls. Another pilot who experienced something similar wrote the following.
Right. These ghosts speak with human voices, friendly forms of vapor, without substance, able to disappear or appear at will, to enter and exit through the walls of the fuselage as if there was no walls there. Charles Lindbergh. I was just thinking, without wanting to disrespect any of these pilots back then, how well were they supplied with oxygen when they were flying back in the days? Because I was thinking maybe their minds were kind of playing tricks on them if they didn't get enough oxygen. But I have no clues about flying back then. So yeah, don't know. But that was my first thought. Maybe they didn't get enough oxygen and then all started seeing these little thingies.
The cases became so common that the British Air Ministry created a commission to investigate each case, including a Gremlins expert who created a guide indicating the most common acts of the creatures and the scenarios in which they had to be looked out for. What do you think? Could they have been delusions or hallucinations? If so, how was it that it happened to so many pilots? What could these creatures have been?
But then maybe, yeah, that is weird though, that it happened to so many of them, and that they all saw more or less saw the same things. But then maybe, you know, once you hear about something from someone, and now I'm sitting in the plane and I'm thinking about them, oh, like, I don't know, Herbert was flying the other day and he saw these creatures. Will I see these creatures too? And then I do, because I think about them.
Number 3. Mysteries have always captured people's curiosity, whether they are paranormal events, supernatural powers, or unexplained events. And among all of them, those that occur on a plane undoubtedly stand out above the others due to the fact that they occur in mid-flight. And a clear example of that lies in the shocking story of Flight 513. On the morning of September 4th, 1954, Santiago Airlines Commercial Flight 513 left an airport in West Germany. However, days passed and the plane never reached its destination. It had disappeared somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean without a trace. The authorities assumed that the plane had fallen into the sea and the remains submerged in the ocean. As a result of this disappearance, Santiago Airlines closed its doors to the public in 1956, and nothing else was ever known about the flight or the 92 people on board. Nobody imagined that 35 years later, the case would have shocking news. On October 12, 1989, in Porto Alegre, Brazil, the control tower noticed the arrival of a strange aircraft. On the screen it said it was Flight 513, but despite all attempts to communicate with them, the plane did not respond. The employees of the Porto Alegre airport were surprised by the landing of the plane that was supposed to be lost, and that did not respond to radio signals, so they went to check the interior of the aircraft. What they saw left them extremely shocked. Inside, they did not find anyone alive. All of the occupants had been dead for years, decomposed. In fact, upon entering the cockpit, the captain's corpse was still holding the controls. Could it be assumed that the lifeless body landed the plane?
So wait, was this implied with the thumbnail? Was that recurring to this story? Or was that somebody? The landing skeletons or decomposed bodies, that kind of rang a bell. But I think I might be confusing it with something else. Some other airplane story that landed with corpses inside or crashed with corpses, or God, I've just looked at too many videos or heard about shit, but that just sounded so familiar, but I can't really place it because I have not heard about this whole story. So it must have been something else, but it's still really very weird.
A shocking story, but it sounds like a creepypasta to me. However, to this day, there is no information regarding its veracity. This case has many similarities with another case that does have reports that can authenticate it. To put you in context, on July 2nd, 1955, Pan Am Flight 914 took off from New York City to Miami, Florida, a relatively short journey that should have been flown without major inconveniences. However, 3 hours later, when the plane had to reach its destination, it simply disappeared from the radars. The control towers did not receive distress signals. The plane had simply disappeared into the air. Everything indicated that it had crashed somewhere along the way. However, the search team could not find the remains. Not one piece of the plane was found. Investigators were unable to explain how the aircraft had disappeared with 61 passengers on board. The case was never resolved, and the official statement said the plane crashed but could not be rescued. A mystery that would unbelievably be brought up 37 years later. On September 9th, 1992, the air traffic controller at the Caracas airport in Venezuela saw a plane appear on the radar out of nowhere, as if it had been hiding and suddenly decided to appear. He checked the readings several times, thinking that it was a mistake, but everything was correct. It took about 10 minutes for everyone in the tower to see the plane with their own eyes. As the plane got closer, they realized that it was very old, a McDonnell Douglas DS-4 plane, still with propellers instead of modern turbines. But the strangest thing happened when the pilot of the aircraft contacted the control tower and asked in English, "Where are we?" The controller replied that they were approaching the Caracas airport and asked, "Where are you headed?" After several minutes, the pilot replied, "We are Pan Am Flight 914, heading from New York to Miami, Florida, with a crew of 4 and 57 passengers on board." What was a Pan Am flight doing 1,700 kilometers from its destination? That was the question everyone asked. From the tower, they ordered to clear the runway for the plane to land. They thought that perhaps the pilot had gone crazy, but since there were people on board, they had to be saved. The ground units immediately went to the aid of the plane, which had no problem landing. However, one question would change the course of the entire operation. When the operator told the pilot that it was May 21st, 1992, the pilot reacted in a very bad way, saying that they should get away and that they would leave immediately. The operator tried to stop it, but all to no avail. The plane took off and minutes later disappeared from radar, never to be seen again. Some say that everything was the product of a collective psychosis. However, there are files where many people claim to have witnessed the same event. So this case is much more likely to have been real.
That is weird.
Number 2.
I just got a couple of chills from the whole story. I don't know what to say. I have no clue. That those kind of stories just completely baffle me. I don't know.
As we already realized from the stories of the previous posts, there are situations in which reality is stranger than fiction. The case of the Aloha Airlines Flight 243 is undoubtedly one of them, since to this day what happened on April 28, 1988 is considered a true miracle. That day at 1:20 p.m., the Aloha Airlines Boeing 737-200 was ready on the runway, finalizing the details of positioning and preparing for takeoff. And 5 minutes later, the plane was already in the air, gaining altitude with 90 passengers and 5 crew members. The normality of the flight lasted 21 minutes. After that time, and at 24,000 feet, a true nightmare became a reality. Unexpectedly, the aircraft suffered an explosive decompression that, although you find it hard to believe, blew off part of its roof and much of the lateral fuselage from the front of the wings. Have you ever been on a plane? Just imagine it. The flight is normal until suddenly and without warning, an explosion blows off almost the entire roof of the plane.
Jesus.
Between screams and shrill noises, you look up.
Isn't usually the top is where the masks fall down, the oxygen mask. What the fuck do you do? All that is gone.
And see the open sky. In mid-flight, the plane remained as you now see on the screen. This is a real image, with a third of the passengers in the open, exposed to the fierce winds and temperatures that bordered on 20 degrees Celsius.
Jeez.
It is surely an image so terrifying that it becomes inexplicable. An image that will now haunt you every time you get on a plane. It sounds like science fiction, but it happened in real life. Unfortunately, everything happened so fast that Clarabelle Lansing, the cabin manager, was automatically ejected from the plane.
Oh,
Her body was never found, and it is likely that she died on impact with the sea.
That's sad.
According to many, a terrible misfortune in the midst of a chain of miracles. This was due to the fact that the rest of the passengers and cabin crew were still fastened to their seatbelts, thanks to the fact that the light signal had not been turned off.
I flew a lot as a kid. I mean, I've told you in other videos, I was born abroad, I lived abroad, and we'd always come back to Germany during vacation, summer vacation, or when we lived in Taiwan, we had to go to Hong Kong to get our visas. What's the word? I can't think it. Never mind, you know. But I flew a lot, and I remember my dad always told me to just always keep my seatbelt fastened, even if the light turned off. You know, you could change your position or maybe loosen it a bit, but he just told me to always keep it fastened, and luckily nothing ever happened. And we flew in a typhoon once or twice. I'm not quite sure, but God, I puked my guts out. I mean, the whole plane was puking. That was one bad flight from either from Hong Kong to Taiwan or Taiwan to Hong Kong. I don't quite remember which direction it was, but it was bad. And yeah, as I said, luckily nothing ever happened. And as a kid, I was never scared flying. I loved flying. The only time I ever started to get a bit scared was in 2001. I was on vacation with my boyfriend back then, and it was after September 11th, and it was just a couple of days after that we flew back home to Germany. And that was the first time in my life I was really scared when flying, because yeah, September 11th had just happened. And I knew in my rational mind it was completely, my fear was completely irrational, because this was just, you know, some holiday plane flying from Turkey to Germany. Why should anything happen? But I mean, all of you who lived back then and experienced it or saw what happened, you know, it was just very shocking, very confusing, very emotional, and we didn't really know what the fuck had happened in detail. I don't think anyone knew. And that was, yeah, as I said, that was the only time I was really kind of scared to fly. But yeah. Okay, I got carried away again a bit, sorry.
But it was not the only thing. Everything was given so that the metal of the aircraft would continue to break under so much pressure. In fact, at any moment, it could have split in two, which would have meant the end of the 94 lives that were still on board. However, despite the explosion, and without knowing exactly what was happening, the pilot managed to request an emergency landing at the Kahului airport, the closest city to his position, thus starting the descent of an aircraft that could break into pieces at any second.
Jesus, I'm getting
It was
chills
13
again.
minutes of descent. 13 long minutes that passengers lived in terror of everything that was happening around them, not knowing if they would survive or not.
Probably
A moment
like
when,
3
against
hours.
all odds, another miracle came to light. In the middle of a forced landing, the landing gear responded without major problems. Just imagine what it was like for them to experience that. The images captured on the runway were truly shocking. A plane lay on the tile with a third of its fuselage detached, as if it were an urban tourist bus. A true miracle that to this day is remembered.
Jeez.
Number 1. And we finish this video with which for many is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. I am referring specifically to the case D.B. Cooper, a man who on November 24th, 1971, hijacked a Northwest Orient Airlines Boeing 727 mid-flight. On the morning of that day, Cooper approached the counter of Northwestern Orient Airlines in Oregon, dressed in a suit and carrying a briefcase in hand. He paid cash for a seat on Flight 305 to Seattle, where he ordered a glass of bourbon and sat down to wait for takeoff, without attracting the attention of the rest of the passengers. The plane took off without problems, but in full flight, once the stewardess brought Cooper the drink, he handed a note to her, who reading it said that he had a bomb in his briefcase. When she looked at Cooper, terrified, he opened the briefcase, and there was the bomb. He asked the stewardess to notify the captain and pass him a second note. In this, Cooper asked for 4 parachutes and $200,000 in $20 bills, in exchange for not making the plane explode into 1,000 pieces. The flight attendant took the note to the captain, who arranged for the passengers to get off in Seattle after the subject was handed the money. After freeing the passengers and with the money in his possession, Cooper ordered the crew to put the plane back in the air, bound for Mexico. The police couldn't do anything since he still had the crew hostage, so the plane took off. It was at that moment that the subject places all of the crew in the pilot's cabin and demands to open one of the rear doors, a moment in which, without thinking too much, he jumped with the parachute and the stolen money in the middle of the night over an area covered by a dense forest. Thus begins one of the most incredible mysteries in the United States.
The beginning didn't sound so familiar, but now I think I might have heard about this case before. I'm not sure though, but it started to sound somewhat familiar. Well, never mind, let's go on.
In searching the area, the FBI found no trace of D.B. Cooper. Only a tie was found on the plane. Over the years, a series of investigations had been carried out. More than 800 suspects were mentioned, and even a man named Richard Floyd McCoy was arrested. But he denied all the accusations, and since they did not have enough evidence against him to ensure that he really was D.B. Cooper, they released him. Another possible clue was found by a child in 1980, when the minor found a bundle full of $20 bills near the Columbia River. Bills that turned out to match the serial number of the ransom notes given to Cooper on the day of the kidnapping. The package contained around $5,800, but there was no sign of the rest anywhere. More than 50 years after that event, it is really not known what happened to D.B. Cooper, if he did die on the spot or survived his incredible parachute jump, becoming part of a myth that is remembered from time to time in books, series, or movies, and that without a doubt deserve to crown this video.
I mean, imagine pulling all of that off and then dying. You know, if he jumped with the parachute and then he would have died. I mean, but why would he have lost so much money? But then you wouldn't just throw away over $5,000. And we are never gonna find out anything. That is, sometimes I find these unsolved mysteries so frustrating because yeah, you'll never know what the fuck happened. I mean, as I just said, pulling off a whole thing like this and then you jump out with a parachute, and I don't know, you land stupid and break your neck or break your leg and then you can't flee, or you get attacked by a wild animal or whatever, and everyone thinks, ah, this bastard robbed the here, you know, he pulled it off and he got all this money and now he's living like a king somewhere, and then while instead he died somewhere in the desert or wherever. And yet there's
Do you know of any other case that you would like for me to mention here? Leave your opinion in the comment box, because this video has come to an end. My name is Leonore Clay, and this was The Darkest
my neck.
Secret.
I liked this episode. I really liked it. It was something completely different again than from what we usually watch. And yeah, I know nothing about cases like that. As I said, the last one sounded a bit familiar. I might have heard about it, but I couldn't say for sure. But it just, I was just thinking, imagine compared to today, how easy it was to pull something like that off, while today you have millions of cameras everywhere and they would have gotten thousands of pictures of the dude, and he probably wouldn't have been able to jump from the plane without someone waiting for him wherever he could have landed. Not that I'm saying that it's bad today that people can't pull that shit off today, but there's, I mean, there is some fascination to the ideas people had over the course of time, you know, and what kind of crimes they pulled off. I mean, as long no one gets hurt, nobody gets hurt, I can always kind of, you know, oh god, I can't think of the word, but I think you know what I mean. If people get hurt because some asshole has to pull off some shit, it's like, that's not cool. That's absolutely not cool. But every once in a while, there's a criminal who does something so, in a way, so brilliantly genius, with no one getting hurt, where I can kind of let my fascination, you know, win the better of me. I just don't like it if people get hurt just because some piece of shit has to be a criminal. But that's a whole different story. I mean, here this is just like, wow. I really wonder what became of that dude. Yeah, as I said, we'll never know. But no, all in all, I really liked this episode. It was something completely different again. Yeah, you guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode as well. Have a great day or a great night, and see you in the next video. Bye.